This conversation is going to be very near and dear to my heart because not only does the world know I'm also a Christian, but I'm also a public address announcer for college women's softball. And today we are talking to the athletic director of Colorado Christian University, Jonathan Poag, and the Cougars' 38-game winning streak, with currently holding a 42-2 record this season. Jonathan, congratulations on the team's success.
Yeah, congrats to our girls. I'm joining in with you there, just commending all the work they put into the season. And yeah, they've been on a really special run. And just as a journalistic note of correction, the girls would want is the win streak is actually up to 42-0 after this weekend. They pulled off a sweep out at Colorado Mesa on Saturday and Sunday. So the streak has been extended to 42 games.
Wow, congratulations on that. So that means the record is 44-2 at the moment.
46-2 overall.
46-2. Wow.
Yep.
All right.
36-0 in the conference.
Congratulations. That's a feat that most people do not experience ever. Like, this is going to go down in the record books for you. There is one quote we're gonna touch on it because sometimes we do get the brethren that are the pearl clutching. Where's their humility? One of the quotes that we've read is "God is in our squad," and some people could take that very much the wrong way. Can we clear that statement up? Where I'll give you an example. There was a comedian named Jeff Stills. All right. And he joked that he stopped watching football because he said the winning team would always thank God and the losing team would always thank themselves. And Jeff, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your joke, but Jeff would say, no one ever sits there and goes, we had the game in the bag until Jesus made me fumble because he hates our team. So, like, how do we clear up that misconception of this quote? Because people, often like to look for the negative instead of the positive in the statement.
Yeah. Certainly you hear that in sport quite often. I think God's for everyone. I think he's about everyone finding their flourishing. And I don't know that he's rooting for CCU over anyone else. I think when our girls refer to that, I think they refer to being in the squad as just being, hey, their faith is really important to them. And, they're playing softball. In a way, just to live into their giftings. They're athletes, they're passionate, and part of the way they bring glory to God is just to do that with a high amount of excellence. But I think if you pinned them down and be like, hey, is God rooting for you versus I think they would all say no, that's not the case. It's I think they're just really grateful for the run they're on, and for them they see life through a Christian worldview, and that's not about favoritism or God's preference over winning or losing. I just think they're working really hard, and they see that as an outpouring of their faith. So
good, because we want to dismiss every misconceptions from the beginning before we get into the meat of this. And Coach Larry Hayes, that's sitting there on his win streak, and the love that he also has for the game.
Right.
When the streak began, hey. 2 games is considered a streak. Okay, we're 3 in. Wow, it's set. You're 7-0 all of a sudden. Okay, it's 16-0. Like, how does the mindset shift? And how does Larry keep everybody in check, because he is essentially captaining the ship, of not letting the ego get in the way and the pride of we're almost unstoppable?
Yeah, I think for Larry, I mean, he's been at this a long time. He's no stranger to success and high rankings and win streaks. And I think he's such a grounded person. And so, every weekend, no one's talking about the streak. It's like, hey, we got an opponent in front of us and we got to respect that opponent. And I think that's been one of the cool things about this is no one's concerned about the 42 games. It's not the primary focus. It's just like, hey, what's a task for today? And really about playing to a standard as opposed to a circumstance. Is a quote I'm stealing from one of our coaches here on staff, Cam Sandlin. He's our men's golf coach. And we're having lunch the other day, and I'm like, how are you doing? He's like, I'm just really encouraging guys to play to the standard, not the circumstance. And that's a phrase I could hear Larry saying, through and through. And that's something that he does really well with the girls, is he keeps them focused on the present moment. As opposed to focused on how long can they keep the streak going and that sort of stuff. So very process-oriented coach, process-oriented team that has high standards and really shoots to achieve those standards day in and day out.
Yeah. That's something that's exciting to see, especially in the world of sports, because so many people, end up focusing on the pride and end up
Hmm.
focusing on look what we did, look what we did, look what we did. And then there's also the everyone wanting to take credit for the success when everybody's winning, and then everyone wants to point the finger at everybody else
Sure.
when they're losing.
Yep.
Like Jeff's joke of, Jesus made me fumble in the regard of, well, we were up, 4-1 till the shortstop, didn't pick up the ball in time, and then all of a sudden,
Yep.
here we are, and we just lost the inning, and now we're down 5-4, or
Yep. Right.
whatever it is. Like
Yep.
from a Christian aspect, how do we also work through that and go, okay, we're a community. The church is a community. We're not a church of one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's deciding whether, from an athletic standpoint, it's no one person is going to completely move the needle towards the win or the loss or the success or the failure. I think there's a real buy-in to the collective with this team, and I think that's one thing that as a descriptor of most teams that are championship level or really good teams. There's a sense of selflessness that's at play within the culture of that team, and so we're not perfect. We've got errors on the season. We've got, certainly plays we'd love to get back and strikeouts we'd love to get back. And I think the thing that really personifies the sense of culture and community on this team is when something like that happens, someone else is there to pick it up. Someone else is there to, pull in the slack and get everyone focused again. So, it's just, yeah, I think they're playing for each other. I think they're playing for something bigger than themselves. And I think they do enjoy um, being able to represent part of who they are outside of the sport within it in terms of their Christian faith. And so there's a nice interplay there between, their sport and their faith, and also just how they care about each other, kind of as a demonstration of their faith lived out.
With this being a Christian school and I believe non-denominational, correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
You know, when everyone comes together in this regard, and even though the school's non-denominational, some of the students will come from different denominations, whether Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Presbyterian, etc. That unification within the faith in that regard, and I'm not talking about ecumenism, I'm talking about just the unity in the faith. How important is that the prayers are met, like the prayer circle before the game, praying after the game, the interaction within each other, and the drive for hope and love for one another, as St.
Hmm.
Paul had told us to continue
Hmm.
it forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the cool things you get in college, whether you're in sport or just regular college life, all these kids are coming to it at different stages of their process in terms of, awareness, receptivity, mature in their faith, or young or growing. And I think that's one of the great things to watch in this platform of college athletics is like everyone's welcome in that circle, and whether or not you're new to the faith or you've been in it since you were 12, or in Larry's case, Larry's 82 years old and he's got decades upon decades of wisdom to share. I think that's what makes it pretty neat is that everyone's welcome in that prayer, and everyone's can pray and feels comfortable praying and sharing their heart in that moment. It's not about this standard of like, well, you've arrived at this level, therefore you can speak into this space with a Christian tone. I think that's been a really special thing to watch this group kind of mentor each other. The peer-to-peer growth that you're seeing in that space has been a pretty cool thing to watch. So
That sounds fantastic because it's always funny when I see like social media Christians, and I'm putting that in quotations, where they converted like a month and a half ago and they're like, I'm going to
sure,
start a ministry. I was like, all right, let's slow down. You've
sure,
you've only been a part of the family for a month and a half. You're just the in-law at this point. You just got married in.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like let's
yeah,
slow the
yeah.
roll on trying to take the patriarchate. Um, when you see the zealousness of that coming into sports, and I'm not using zealous in a bad way, I'm using it in,
Mhm.
on fire for Christ. Let's use a Protestant
Mhm.
term in that regard. How also exciting is that to see that, because not just the win streak, but also within the performance on the field and then off the field, because it's two totally different worlds when you're in the game versus when you're at practice. Because practice makes permanent, not perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we try to really lean into the fact that like virtue is a really important variable of your faith, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And so I think when our kids are out competing, we're hoping that the way they compete says something virtuous about, who defines their life and what defines their life. And so that it's, there's an opportunity there uh, to do some of that virtue ethics, where I think that's where athletics can speak a language in and of itself. And, if you do a great job and you're winning and you're competitive, I think it generates interest in what your process is as a group and what defines your team. And, just the virtue of being able to win and compete at a high level and demonstrate excellence opens up some conversation lines that would transcend the sport. And so it's not always about, passing out a track or trying to capture someone in trap them in a prayer or something like that. It's more of like, hey, how do we represent ourselves and how do we represent Christ well in every space that we're in, whether that's the classroom, whether that's in competition, or whether that's in the handshake line after the game, to be honest, and one of the cool things is like, I think sometimes when you're the Christian school on the block, it's easy for people to forget that like Christianity is happening everywhere, right? And so I think sometimes some folks approach it from a very narrow perspective of like, oh, you're the good versus the bad team.
Mm.
And one of the coolest things for me is like when we're playing teams and other kids are expressing their faith at other schools we're playing against, and it's just a great reminder that like Christianity is so much bigger than just us here at CCU or our softball team. There's a lot of young people trying to live their faith out in really important and impactful ways. So that's always one of the greatest parts about college athletics is you get so much of exposure to so many different kids across so many different sports. And it's always an encouragement when you see, young people finding ways for their faith to come out through their passions. And so we celebrate that, whether it's at CCU or the university down the road. It's, we like seeing that across all universities and campuses.
And that goes along with one of the quotes that I have, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her name, Elise McMillan,
Mm-hmm.
who's a junior pitcher and third baseman.
Yep.
She said, every team wants to beat us, but Coach Hayes always tells us to trust ourselves, keep it simple, and play our game. The whole
Yep.
team worships together and supports each other, and we all know we are playing for Jesus Christ. And I think the for Christ aspect is something that's extremely important in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, at least it's great. And I think when I hear that quote directly, the first thing that comes to mind is just like priorities, right? It's like, I think the team understands like what their priorities are, and although softball is really important and something they're putting a lot of time into, I think they keep it in perspective and they understand like their number one priority is Christ as opposed to this game. And I think it honestly frees them up to play it differently. Like their identity's not trapped in it. And, win, lose, or draw, they know they're walking away from the stadium just confident in who they are and who they're following. So, yeah, when I hear that, I hear priorities and that they're stacked up the right way. And Elise is a great representation of that.
You being the AD, you have to have your hand in everything in regards that, like, you got to go to the track meet, you got to go to the softball game, the baseball game, the swim meet, the
Sure.
football game, et cetera, et cetera. And, you can't hyper focus on one over the other because it's your blanket thing. For people, we'll explain it kind of like the bishop over a jurisdiction. You kind of have your jurisdiction and all the
Yeah.
sports are within your jurisdiction. When you sit there and you come to the softball game and, like, let's go back to, home opener at game one, and you're watching them
Hmm.
play, and then now here we are at the tail end of the season in the NCAA and watching them now. What evolution have you seen from the outside looking in, because you're not on the field with them on a daily basis,
Yep.
that you've noticed from game one to now game 46?
Yeah, I think that the density of their belief has just gotten stronger. I think in game one or game two or you open conference play, there's still some unknowns about what that team is in stressful situations, right? And now when I watch them play, say we're down a couple runs heading into the later innings of the game, early in the year, you're just not sure how they're going to respond to that. And right now they're just responding with a lot of confidence and a lot of belief in each other, that they're going to get the job done. And I was chatting with their coaches the other day, and I was like, what, we've had a lot of good softball teams around here, and it's just like, well, what are you guys seeing in this one that's a little different than ones we've had in the past? And they're like, they believe it. And like, they just believe they're good and they're going to figure it out. And they're going to problem solve and they're going to find ways to win. And so we've seen that throughout the course of this win streak that, late innings, extra innings, someone stepping up, and there's just a real strong sense of belief that they're going to deliver and get it done. So it's been neat to watch that evolution. But yeah, I think just to answer that question, try to answer it directly is just, I don't know, the belief has just gotten stronger, and there's just a degree of density to what's going on with that team that takes 42 games to really put together. And it's an exciting time to see them heading towards the postseason. And if they can keep that sense of belief going as they come up against some teams that are not so bad at softball themselves. So
Yeah. Also, being an athletic director, I want to bring this up since we are talking about softball, a primarily women's sport, especially in the
mhm.
United States.
Yep.
Women's sports is huge on the rise at this point. If not for
Yep.
women's wrestling, a lot of wrestling programs would have been cut from universities.
Yeah.
Flag football is an emerging sport.
Yep.
What does that say to the drive, not only within softball or water polo or the traditional female sports like field hockey, but now in these other the combative sports of wrestling, and
hmm
then flag football, and coming in and creating more atmosphere for female athletes and more opportunities.
Yeah, I think like the appetite for athletics is evolving, and I think a lot of young ladies are growing up having people they're excited about, want to emulate. You've got professionalization of women's sports is increasing, and they're getting more airtime, and they're just seen on a different level than they were a decade or 2 decades ago or three. And so I think it's great because they play a really exciting game. And so the interesting part to watch over the next 10 years is how will they continue to carve out something that's uniquely their own. And I think in the past it's like women's sports becomes like, oh, it's a lesser version of the men's game. And what I think I've been noticing as an AD is like we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing the women really carve out their own version of the game, and it's really unique and exciting. And I think maybe for the first time in American sports culture, we're starting to the common observer is starting to recognize that too, that there's some unique features to the game that make it its own and make it exciting for those reasons. And it's not viewed as just you got Major League Baseball and AAA and AA. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, hey, it's its own thing, and it's a really exciting thing. And it's really fun to see our female athletes having that platform to enjoy the notoriety, and their success is recognized as really special. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of just women's sports in general. I mean, we've got incredible female athletes here on campus. Our soccer team is full of awesome leaders, and we've had so many impactful people come through our female athletics programs here at CCU. And certainly for this team, it's like, if you spend time with this softball team, they're great players. You go to batting practice, you'll see fireworks, but one of the awesome parts is they're people of impact off the field. And it's so fun to, see Elise on campus or see Ari on campus or you name it, so many different ladies that are doing other things that reflect their excellence in other areas of life as well.
Right.
And so it's I don't know, it's just a really good energy, and there's some really good things developing within this softball team that transcend sport, men or women. It's just I'm always a big proponent that when people ask you, oh, what makes for a great organization or a great department or a great team, and I'm always just, hey, like, great organizations, great teams are defined by great people. It's not always the great athlete. It's great people that can rally around a core concept that they all believe in, and I think we're seeing that firsthand with our softball team here.
Right. And that leads me into the next thought is that, what would you like to say for Christian athletes? Because people will see the numbers, and your numbers are astonishing, especially
Mhm.
the win-loss record this year, and go, oh wow, that's incredible, and be inspired by that. What
Sure.
would you like if people coming to the game and then meeting the women after the game, and just have quick personal interaction, because people want to meet the athletes,
Sure.
especially in their success. What experience would you prefer them to focus on instead of just the win column stats in meeting these young women and their interactions?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think we're trying to encourage our kids to be authentic, and honest about where they are in their life. And, I think you're never going to meet a perfect person. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And we've had people try and they want to get there and they want to present a certain way, all shiny and clean, and it's wrapped up in a bow and it's nice and understandable. And I think we just don't know if that talks once they leave. Do you know what I mean? That's not what the world's experiencing, and the world approaches Christianity with a varying degree of opinions and perceptions. And our goal is that our kids would be authentically who they are wherever they are. And that's a permission to be honest about their struggles. It's permission to be honest about their successes and the things that they're joyful about in their life. But at the end of the day, like, the world doesn't need more people trying to put on a front. It needs more authenticity that is accessible for people. And so, yeah, our hope is if you're interacting with these ladies, like, you're getting an authentic look at who they are and what they say they mean, and they're hoping their behaviors reflect their beliefs. And if they're doing that, then they're doing pretty good. So, yeah, I think the key word for me is just, hey, let's be authentic with who we are. And it's okay if that's not always super clean and polished. Like, sometimes it's a little gritty. It's
Right.
a little, life's a grind sometimes. And, they're breaking up with boyfriends and family problems. And, but at the end of the day, there's a really redemptive theme running through who they are. And that's directly bound to their faith. And so we just hope their life is, it kind of echoes the larger narrative we see of redemption in Scripture. And you can't echo that accurately if you're not authentic. So that's what we're chasing.
Well, when half of the New Testament is written by the greatest persecutor of the church at the time,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there
Yep.
there is the redemptive quality.
Yep.
Uh, what would you like to tell, Christians that are going to a secular university? Because we have a huge rise of Christianity at this point. We have
Hmm.
a resurgence in the faith, and
Hmm.
there's always this ebb and flow. We will have, an awakening and then a dip and another awakening and a dip, and here we are
Hmm.
in essentially another great awakening,
Sure.
whether they're going into the evangelical movement or coming to the apostolic traditions, across the spectrum
Yep.
within
Yep.
Christianity. What would you like to tell those that are going to secular universities and how to stand strong in their faith, and those that are either coming in as incoming freshmen or transfers to, say, CCU or a similar Christian university?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I, I think for so long, evangelicalism in North America, it's gotten boiled down and distilled into this, like, escape from hell, right? And salvation is wrapped up in 3 chapters in the New Testament. And, if you get that, you got it. You know what I mean? And I just encourage anyone, young people, old people, college kids, not like, we're left an entire narrative that is about so much more than escaping hell, right? It's about the Missio Dei, like, it's a bigger redemptive narrative that we get to be a part of. We're not the reason it works. Um, God's going to do what he needs to do with or without us, but we have an invitation to join him in his desire to redeem the world and redeem humanity. And so I think it's learning how to broaden that spectrum of our own Christian formation, outside of just, your verse for your life or your theme thing. It's like, no, there's a whole story here. There's a whole narrative about God's people and how to follow him and their successes and failures that we need to figure out how to identify with and let it form us, right?
Right.
And in a society where so much has become, it's just polarized. And I hate when the Christian faith gets boiled down to, you cognitively accept it or reject it, but we miss the total formational capacity of what it means to be following Christ. And, you can do that at a Christian school, you can do that at a secular school, you can do that in your job, you can do it anywhere. And I just think we need to, always stay tuned in to the way the Lord's trying to speak to us, through people in our life, through pastoral figures in our life, but also through his word. And I just, for me, it's just continuing to encourage young people that, hey, there's more here than just escaping hell. You get to participate in God's plan of redemption. And I think that's pretty compelling. It's like, hey, we're not just trying to escape this. We're like, let's do this. God's real and active, and he's only active all the time. And if that's true, there's something for us in that too, in terms of how we participate with his story within the world. And I'm always reminded, I can't take credit for this. Someone probably said this somewhere along the way, but it's like, if you're a believer and you're a follower, like, God's story is not just true for us, it's true for everyone. And so it's like, how do we, how do we get people in on that? How do we let people know that there's a really special story here, and it's a story of redemption, and it's not just a story for me or you. It can be a story for all of us, and how we go about sharing that and just opening that space up to people is it's pretty clever thing to do.
I
So
really like that, Jonathan. Well, Jesus did say, a healthy man does not need a physician. And then at the end of the fourth, beginning of the fifth century, St. John Chrysostom is famously quoted as saying, the church is not a courtroom, it is a hospital for the sick
yeah,
that are seeking remission of sins. And I would
yeah,
think that's something I would love for Western Christianity to relearn, is that
totally,
we're not on trial, we're trying to get healthy.
yeah.
And coming to the faith is seeking health, health and wellness.
Yeah, totally, man. And you've seen it. If you're paying attention, like, the faith is so easy to get co-opted, and people take it and they prostitute it for their own agenda, right?
Yeah.
And sorry if that sounds forceful, but it
No, it's
happens.
true.
Like, it's happened throughout the course of history, and it's just like, it's just like, give it a chance to speak for itself, as opposed for, once we get our hands into it, we have a way of proof texting it and manipulating it. And, not like a third grader does when they're praying for X Christmas gift. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just like, no, it's just like, don't choose to view it as this like thing to weaponize or help support your agenda. It's just like, let it shape you, let it form you. And if you're successful at that, then we can, we can trust our overtures to everyone in the world to, keep leading in and pushing in towards something redemptive and restorative. And I think when we see those things happening around us, it's such a great encouragement to keep chasing it. So
Jonathan, to tie this all back in, especially with the Cougars and their incredible streak, especially in softball right now, St. Paul often mentioned that through salvation, it's like the athlete running the race. It's the training montage
yeah,
getting us there to the finish line.
yeah,
Saint Ignatius the first of Antioch, who was appointed bishop of Antioch by St. Peter, sat there and always talked about health and wellness and being, as a physical manifestation, as an example of prayer
hmm
through your health and athleticism. What would you like to tell not only the Christian athletes that you have under you at Colorado Christian University, and especially the Cougars in softball, but other Christian athletes as well that want to figure out the balance? Because like myself as a wrestler, it is a violent sport, but how many Christian wrestlers have there been throughout the ages in the last 2 millennia that were still very faithful, or how many Christian soldiers and military personnel, and finding that balance of athleticism and competition within faith.
Man, you ask big questions. It's hard to answer that. I think I think sometimes, like, rhythm or liturgy kind of became a dirty word in Christianity for a while, like liturgical. But when
I'm very liturgical, if you haven't
yeah,
noticed.
I'm picking up on that, which is pretty cool, because I think we are like behaving creatures, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think a lot of times it's easy to grow up within the faith and cognitively accept or reject a Christian idea, but I believe eating at McDonald's is not healthy, but I still do it 5 times a week. So what does that say, right?
Right.
Like, what is it? My behavior would suggest it's, if you follow me around, you'd be like, man, it's got to be the healthiest. He does this all the time. It's got to be the healthiest thing out there. Um, and so I think it's that. It's about like, how do your habits in life, prepare you for what's around you. And that's very synonymous with the athletic endeavor. It's like, preparation is key, right? Preparation is really important, so that when it comes at you, and you know how to improvise faithfully about how to solve the problem or how to be successful. And I just don't, I don't think there's a multiple choice. You can't ace this thing. And so our only hope in doing good things that are restorative and redemptive is to be so habitually engaged in this story that when we have situations come at us, we can faithfully improvise through those in a way that we believe the Lord would take joy in. And so it's like, hey, like, this is not a true false thing. Like, not every situation is black and white. But if you have been comprehensively formed by the entire narrative of Scripture, not just part of it, then shouldn't we be able to faithfully improvise our way through the challenging moments in life that can be a little bit messy? So running the race with perseverance, all those things. It's like, yeah, prepare with intention. Like, you're going to be shaped by something. Like, something in your life is going to shape you, whether it's a consumer narrative or an individualistic narrative that's about self-promotion. Like, you are only getting shaped and persuaded all the time. And so we get an opportunity here to say, all right, I'm going to make a decision about what narrative is going to be most formational in my life. And if it's this narrative of Scripture, then it gives us a really good opportunity to improvise our way through the challenges that are before us. But yeah, for the athlete, it's the same idea, right? It's like, prepare. You go and you shoot 1,000 shots. Not to say you shot 1,000 shots. You shoot it so you're prepared to do it when it counts. And I think the same thing applies as you're trying to live out your faith. So yeah, and shout out to all those ideas are shared and borrowed from folks like Richard Middleton and all these guys that think really, really hard, and we just we get to take those ideas and try to practically apply them into the spaces where we live and work. So
Jonathan Poag, I really want to thank you for your time today talking about the Cougars, your softball record, this incredible win streak of a season, especially at Colorado Christian University. Let us know where we can purchase tickets for the next home game, and when will that be?
yeah, so we do everything on site. So you can show up, you can pay with card, cash, whatever you want there. Around in the postseason timeframe, you can also purchase online in advance. But yeah, we're at All-Star Park in Lakewood, Colorado, and yeah, we got a great setup, awesome venue with tons of space. So if you're feeling interested in what's going on down there with this team, we'd love to have you out and welcome you to the stadium.
John, next time I'm in Colorado, I definitely want to come visit the campus, check things out. I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
Athletic Director, Colorado Christian University, Jonathan Poag, congratulations on this win streak. And as we are in this Pentecost season, we remember Christ conquered death. So all things are done through him. And the fact that the ladies understand that is the most important aspect of all of this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for taking the time to throw some light on these ladies. They've been working hard and they deserve all the attention coming their way, and they're handling it well. So yeah, thanks a ton.